Hi, everybody. I want to welcome you guys to Curriculum Night. I know it's a little bit of a different feel this year being in remote learning, but hopefully I can do a good job and kind of give you a little bit of insight into our class and make sure everybody's on the same page going forward. So I wanted to talk a little bit about myself first, just so you guys kind of get to know me. For me, this is my 16th year teaching. 15 of those have been over at Stony Creek, one of those over at Rochester High School. This semester, I'm teaching Language Arts 10 and World History, so it's very possible for the students that I have this year in World History, I might get you again next year in Language Arts 10 or even in U.S. History, which I also usually teach. In our district, I coached football for about 9 years, and then I still coach baseball over at Rochester High School as the varsity baseball coach. I've been in that position for about 11 years now. Over at Stony Creek, I also am the sponsor of the Build On Club at Stony Creek. You can see a picture of some of the students down there in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. The Build On Club tries to raise money to build schools in developing nations. We've actually been able to raise money to build and actually send students to build schools in Malawi, Senegal, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and Haiti so far. And you can also see on this slide, I have two daughters, Lily and Nora. They're in the upper right-hand corner on here. Interestingly enough, you might have seen a picture of them already if you have my wife as a teacher also. So the first thing I wanted to do is talk a little bit about our course and what it is that the students are going to be learning. So these are some of the units that we look at during the first semester. We start with the Foundations unit where we look at world religions. That's currently where we are. Then we'll look at trade networks, rise and fall of empires, the Middle Ages, which is extensive, and then the Renaissance and Reformation, and also the Age of Exploration. And it's a little bit condensed just because the semester ends before the holiday break, which is earlier than what we've ever had before. So there'll be a lot more information during that second semester. So being that we're in a remote learning setting, there's a number of different things that we have to look at that are going to be very different in here. So I just try and give you a little bit on the expectations part. One of the biggest challenges that I have is not being able to see your son or daughter every day in class and be able to read their face and get a little bit of an idea of where they are. That's one of the reasons why I put on here all the time that if students are confused, it's okay. Make sure that they reach out and ask whatever questions they can. I'm very available during the course of all of our class periods, before or after, so that I can try and help out as much as they need. And I think that it's important that students know that it's okay to not be okay. Nobody signed up for this type of situation, and I think that we're all trying to adjust accordingly. So we can adjust as we have challenges along the way. So if students need any help, make sure that they reach out. On your end, reach out to me if you ever have any questions as well, and especially if we're looking at extended time, extra help. I'll do my best to be flexible with you and try and make sure that nobody suffers just because we're still dealing with the pandemic. So I have a little bit more on Google Classroom on here. We've been using Google Classroom so far. Students are pretty well versed when it comes to that. Their students are going to be able to find announcements, reminders, and really just about anything else that we need. We'll be using that while we're in this setting. And probably once we return back to school, we'll still use this from time to time. Our daily routine right now has students checking Google Classroom at the beginning of the day just so that they can get a little bit of information on what our day will look like. We usually are going to end up meeting in our Zoom meetings and then breaking out and doing a number of other things. There might be some days where I'll end up having a warm-up activity that students will do first, and then we'll set a time to meet afterwards. Anything that I can do, I'll post for you there on Google Classroom. And I want you to know that I'll always be available on the Zoom for the entire 90 minutes. So even if I do give students like a warm-up activity, I'll still be logged in right at the time so that they can pop in individually and ask questions. Same thing goes if we have an assignment that they're doing in the second half of class. They might want to leave and then come back and ask questions, and I'll still be there for the duration of it. Another thing that I list on here is just talking a little bit about academic integrity. I think it's one of the challenges that we have right now is that remote learning lends itself to cheating pretty much in every activity that you do. For students, if they do end up getting caught, there's always the traditional consequences. But I think one of the biggest things to convey on my end, and maybe on yours as well, is that for students, even though we're facing these challenges right now, they're still being held accountable for it. I often will tell them that the ball keeps on bouncing. So when you look at what we're doing, we don't learn less because we're in remote learning. We just look for new ways of learning it. So that's kind of the situation that we're in right now. And I think that's a big challenge for students, is not necessarily looking for the easiest way to do things, but still trying to take charge of their learning to make sure that they know everything that they need to by the time the class ends, because we know that that'll be something that'll catch up with them as we return, or in later years, or even as they're taking taking standardized tests in the future. A couple more quick things to throw out there for you. So our grading policy, I haven't listed a ton of information on here. What I did want you to know is everything is based on a total points grading system. We'll continue to assign things, and students will be working on that during the course of this. I think as we adjust back to in-person whenever we do, that's where things are going to end up changing a little bit more. So we're going to kind of modify as much as we can when we get to that point. As far as things like tests, quizzes, projects, we're going to address those as we get to that point, just because for some of those things we might hold off until we return back to in-person, or we might look at some newer ways of trying to assess students as opposed to your traditional maybe Scantron test or multiple choice or matching, that type of format. So we'll keep everything very fluid on there, and I'll make sure I communicate with students well in advance before we have something. For absences, if you know that your student is going to be gone at some point, please let me know in advance. I'll be reaching out to students that miss class so that they know exactly what it is that they need to do. But please make sure that you guys communicate with me as well. And then I did mention already, but if and when we return back to in-person, I think that a lot of things will be adjusted, and we'll keep making those adjustments as we go. So I've also thrown on here my contact information for you. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm usually pretty good about getting back to people in a timely manner, and I'll do my best to communicate with you guys as we go as well. Besides for that, I hope everything is working out well for you with remote learning so far. Thank you for all the work that you guys are doing. Your students have been doing a great job, and I'm really pleased to see what they're capable of in this type of setting. And I look forward to working with them a little bit later on as we continue on with this school year. So thank you a lot.